Welcome to a bonus edition of Behind the Mic with AudioFile Magazine. I'm Joe Reed. Today it's our Who's Listening feature, where AudioFile talks with top authors, narrators, and others about how and why they listen to audiobooks. Today I'm talking with Sara DiVello. She's a true crime writer, the founder and host of the interview series Mystery and Thriller Mavens, and co-chair of the Nantucket Book Festival. Sara's latest book, Broadway Butterfly, a thriller, has drawn praise from critics, readers, and audiobook fans, with narrator Jordan Cobb bringing the story to life. Sara is joining me now. Welcome, Sara.
Hi, Joe. I'm so thrilled to be here.
I'm thrilled to have you. On your website, you describe yourself as a lifelong passionate reader and mystery lover. So how did books become such an important part of your life?
I am fortunate to be from a family that is also a family of passionate readers. So some of my favorite childhood memories are my grandmother, who was the ultimate mystery and thriller lover, reading my sisters and my cousins and I Nancy Drew books, and sitting around her feet as she read us these books was so wonderful and just my favorite thing to do. And I think that sparked a lifelong love of reading, of mysteries, and also listening to mysteries.
I grew up on Nancy Drew as well. They were just wonderful.
The best.
Yeah. And of course, you're a true crime writer as well. And Broadway Butterfly is based on one of the most notorious unsolved murders in 1920s New York City. What is the pull of true crime for you?
I am what I like to call Team Twain. So I think Mark Twain said it best, which is truth is stranger than fiction. And I love that. So the burden on a fiction writer is to make an imaginary world believable. But no matter how well they do it, there will always be someone who will say, that's not realistic, or she would never do that, or he would never say that, or whatever disbelieving thing they have to say about the world or the characters that you've imagined. The great thing about true crime is that you can capture humanity in all of their weird, flawed, too crazy to make up truth. And when someone is tempted to say, that would never happen, you can say, oh, but it did.
And what made you want to tell that particular story?
Yeah, so I think that the things that I really care to talk about, which is truth, justice, who has access to justice, what defines justice, who doesn't really have access to justice, what makes something fair, who's excluded, who's included, who has privileges, what do you do with those privileges? All of these rich and meaty themes are the things that I really like to think about and nerd out about. I also love to be up late reading, hooked into a story, up past my bedtime, begging for just one chapter. So what I loved about the story of Dot King is that it was both of these things. It was all of the things that I love to talk about, and I could sandwich it between the spines of a page-turning thriller.
Yeah, it was such a vivid snapshot of that era.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you. And it's like, Dot King was the most known as the most beautiful woman in Manhattan. She was a professional model. And she was New York City's it girl. She was the Kim Kardashian or, whoever the current it girl is today. And people were fascinated by her and enthralled by her beauty. And she was just so glamorous and so fabulous. And she lived life on her own terms. She was sassy and fierce and independent and made her own money and played by her own rules. And so when she was found murdered in her bed on West 57th Street, wearing a lace negligee that barely reached her knees. This was one of the, first shocking things that first titillated and then transfixed people, first across New York and then across the country about this woman and about her murder, and made everyone, want to know who killed New York City's it girl. And I think that's what hooked me into the story.
Jordan Cobb did such a terrific job narrating that audiobook.
Yes. Oh, she's amazing.
Were you involved at all in the casting process?
I was not, and I had hoped to be and wanted to be, because I actually have another book as well, and I had gotten to be very involved in the casting of that. They had sent me 5 actors that had auditioned for the role, and I had picked the voice that spoke to me as embodying the energy and the story the best. And so in my mind, I have a finely tuned ear. I should be the one to make the selection. And so I had sort of emailed my publisher to check in, and they said, "Oh, we already picked someone." And my first reaction was to panic clench, because who better than me could pick the right voice for this story? But then when I listened to Jordan, I was like, "Oh my God, she's perfect." And I realized there was literally no one better to tickle the eardrums of listeners and to bring these characters to life than her.
Well, let's turn to your own listening. When did you first start listening to audiobooks?
Yeah, so I think because my grandmother was reading to us, and my mother also read to us when we were really little, I resonated with vocal storytelling on a really deep level. And something that I've noticed is that so many of us do. There's something so nourishing about being read to. And I notice that even when I go to events and they ask me to read from the book, at first I was nervous to do that because I'm not a professional audiobook narrator. But when I look around the room at people's faces, I can see that they are also transported back to some core memory that is like me being transported back to my grandmother reading us Nancy Drews. And there's just something inherently nourishing and restorative and good for the spirit about that. So I'm really picky about the voices. It's like I always think of it like dating. You got to find somebody whose voice does not annoy the crap out of you.
I agree.
And then when you find that, right, so I always listen to the snapshot to make sure that the voice and I are vibing. And then once I do, I just love to listen. And I listen while I go for walks. I listen while I pedal the elliptical. I listen if I have to do a long drive. And there's just something so wonderfully nourishing to the spirit about that process.
Do you follow certain genres? Or you mentioned, you go for the voice. Are there particular narrators that you look for?
So I read very, very widely. I just love a great story. So, of course, I love mysteries and thrillers. Again, I'm a Nancy Drew girl, but I also love memoirs. I love what I love about memoirs is that often the person will read the book themselves. And it just brings me deeper into the story because not only am I hearing their words in their voice, I'm hearing their story. So it's sort of a triple level of connection. So I really, really love that. I remember I had listened to one book called, the name of the memoir was Spinster, about a woman who had chosen not to get married, and she narrated it, and I absolutely loved that. But I will also listen to any fiction story. I'll listen to anything. For me, it's all about a great story and a voice that I want to be in the company of for those 6, 8, 10, 12, 18 hours, however long it is.
Exactly. Before we wrap up, I want you to tell me about your series, Mystery and Thriller Mavens. Why did you start it?
Oh, thank you so much for asking. So before the pandemic, I used to do a lot of events. I both went to book festivals and writers' conferences where I taught and spoke. And I also, as a yoga teacher, would teach around the country at national yoga festivals. So everywhere from the Nantucket Book Festival, the Maine Yoga Festival, the LA Film Festival, women's wellness conferences, corporate conferences. I did it all. I would do about 40 events a year. And during spring 2020, like the rest of us, I found myself stuck at home with all of my events canceled. Now, I had originally hoped that Broadway Butterfly would come out on March 15th, 2020, but the story was so complicated and the research took me so much longer than I thought that thank goodness in hindsight it didn't. But on March 15th, 2020, which we now know was the day that the world shut down, I kept thinking, oh my God, thank goodness my book didn't come out today. And then quickly, oh my God, what about all my friends and fellow authors whose books are coming out? And meanwhile, bookstores had shut down. Amazon, was considering, books as non-essential items. So authors couldn't get their books to readers and readers couldn't get books. And so I thought, I'm stuck at home. What can I do to jump in and help? Because I've got all this extra time on my hands. So I started interviewing authors on Monday nights, the day before their book came out. And I thought it would last a couple weeks. The days of those hopeful, early days of the pandemic, of course, it ended up, being much, much longer than that. And by then, I had already invested, into building a website, creating graphics. I had invested, thousands of my own dollars and many more thousands of my own hours to create my Mystery and Thriller Maven series. And much to my surprise, I found I loved it. I loved talking to authors about writing and craft and what makes a book work and what keeps a reader up late into the night begging for just one chapter, and also what makes a book not work. Why do people, do the dreaded DNF, do not finish? And so by then I thought, this is really fun. And I'm, really helping my fellow authors, which is something I've always believed in. And so I kept it going. So we are now 5.5 years into the series, over 500
Amazing.
interviews in. And, I've gotten the very great privilege of interviewing all of the greats, from Patricia Cornwell to Dean Koontz to Walter Mosley, celebrities like Tamron Hall, and really being able to lift a hand to debut authors who are just starting out and who don't have that platform and that audience. And I have a wonderful group of listeners and watchers every week. I call them my mavens. I just hired an assistant, my wonderful Katee, who's been working with me for a year and a half, and we're going to just keep growing and take this to the next level. I'm so excited.
And then there's the Nantucket Book Festival. You're co-chairing the 2026 festival. Tell me why
Yes.
that role is so meaningful for you.
Yeah, so this is my third year co-chairing, and I'm also honored to be a member of the board of the Nantucket Book Foundation, where we do incredible work for authors, readers, and the year-round community, bringing authors to the public schools, providing free books for kids in English and Spanish, funding the bookmobile for people who can't get to the library or can't afford books. That's especially meaningful to me, having grown up in a family that could not afford books. And this will be my third year serving as co-chair, and I couldn't be more honored. I first got involved when I was invited as an author in 2014 to come and talk about my first book, Where in the Ohm Am I?, which I got to cast the voice for that, the narrator for that.
And I should have asked earlier, who narrated Where in the Ohm Am I?
That is the fantastic Eileen Stevens. I listened to about 7, I think, auditioning actors for that role, and I knew immediately as soon as I heard Eileen's voice that she was the right person to bring the story to life, and she absolutely was. She's fantastic.
Okay, let's return to the Nantucket Book Festival.
Yes. So I came to the Nantucket Book Festival in 2014 to present that book and teach yoga, which was absolutely wonderful. And I loved it so much, I kept coming back to it as an attendee and then as a volunteer. And then for my second book, Broadway Butterfly, I was invited to come back as a featured author, and then was so inspired by the work that this foundation does and by this incredible festival that connects readers and writers and amplifies the beautiful work of reading into the world, that when I was invited to co-chair and then subsequently join the board, it was an immediate full body yes for me.
Wonderful. Okay, are you ready for the hard questions?
Now I'm scared, Joe.
What is one of your favorite all-time audiobook listens?
So one of my favorite authors and human beings is Ruth Ware. And Joe, I'm not going to lie, I'm a sucker for an accent. If there is a British accent or an Australian accent, that is extra delicious for me. So I love listening to Ruth's books. Her narrator, for instance, in The Woman in Cabin 10 is Imogen Church. And anyone I get with an
It's
accent is
wonderful.
just I just love an accent. There's just something so extra sexy and delicious about that. Also, I love Jane Harper's books, her Aaron Falk series, as well as her standalones. So as she's Australian, I've had the very great pleasure of interviewing her. And so her audiobook narrator is Stephen Shanahan. Again, give me an accent, and it is a heck yes for me.
I love Ruth Ware. I am such a big fan of hers and of Imogen's, but you just told me about an author I really don't know, so hooray.
Oh my gosh, you have to read Jane Harper. She is fantastic. Her police procedurals, her Aaron Fox series, and two of them have been made into movies starring Eric Bana, and of course he has a very nice voice. So you are in for a treat.
I am. And Sarah, thank you. I really appreciate you giving me your time. And thank you for all the wonderful work you do for books, both audio and print.
Oh, Joe, thank you. It's been such a pleasure speaking with you and also listening to your delicious voice. You have a very good voice as well. So thank you for the time.
Not like Imogen's, let me tell you. I'm a sucker for an accent too, and I don't have it. Sarah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Joe.
That was Sara DiVello, true crime writer, host of Mystery and Thriller Mavens, and co-chair of the Nantucket Book Festival. You'll find more about her audiobook listening in the December print edition of AudioFile magazine. I'm Jo Reed. Good listening.